everybody, and welcome to this introductory webinar on open data and Amazon Web Services. My name is Ariel Gold, and I am the Program Manager for Global Expansion in the AWS Worldwide Public Sector Organization, and I help lead our efforts around open data. I thank you for joining today. I'm going to give you just a quick look at what our agenda is going to be for the next hour, and give you a bit of an introduction to what we're doing here at AWS on open data. So first, I'm going to spend a few minutes on open data use cases, why people are making their data open, talk a little bit about the AWS value proposition in this area, and ways you can get started with open data on AWS. And I'm very excited to have as our guest today Philip Leclerc from the city of Pasadena, the CIO there, who will be talking about their road to open data. We will be having a Q&A session at the end, but you can, throughout this session, please use the console on your right to submit questions, and we'll be collecting those. So please do feel free to submit a question at any time. So just to go over what you're going to learn through this webinar, as I said, these are some of the things we're going to cover, and we hope you'll come away with a better understanding of what open data is, the impact, why you want to consider using AWS for it, and getting started, and the Pasadena story. By way of just framing this for us, we see a global movement around open data. And governments at the national, state, and local level increasingly using it because it provides value in a variety of ways, from increasing transparency and accountability to increasing efficiencies and spurring on entrepreneurship and economic growth. And we see AWS as a logical platform to drive impact with data and make it open. So thank you again for joining, and let's get in it. Okay, so what is open data? There are lots of policies and programs all around the world that are being released and with growing momentum, and they define open data in different ways, but what it comes down to is it's data that you can use, anybody can use for any purpose and for free. We also talk about open data as being data that the public can find easily and access easily and use easily. What does this actually mean? Well, PDFs that are buried deep on websites and hardly ever updated, you're probably not going to think about that as being open data. But if then you look at an API that is made broadly available, well documented so people know how to use it, and is updated as new data becomes available, that's more likely to be considered open data. The important thing here is that there's a spectrum, and data can be more or less open along that spectrum. From just putting data online in those PDFs, because it's better than nothing, to making the data machine readable in static files like CSV and XML, to making data accessible via APIs, big and small, to linked data. And we see our customers progressing along this maturity model as they progress in their open data efforts. So I mentioned before that open data is driving impact and delivering value. Well, what kind of value and what kind of impact? We see across the world and at different levels these types of benefits. There's entrepreneurship and economic growth, the startup community that builds around using data, the increased operational efficiencies and reduced costs. For state and local governments, we hear a lot that just the benefits of reduced costs from Freedom of Information Act, FOIA requests, is tremendous. Instead of responding again and again to requests for the same data, putting it out proactively can reduce those costs. And also sharing data between different silos of an organization has great operational benefits. Now, there's improving delivery of services to the public. When you can get people outside your organization to use your data to deliver applications to your citizens that can give them more of that consumer technology experience. So you see a lot of cities that are releasing information around bus routes and applications being built to help citizens figure out when the next bus is coming. Increasing transparency and accountability. This is something that was one of the earliest use cases and one of the earliest motivations around open data, something from the earlier open government movement. And we have a lot of examples from the Recovery, Accountability, and Transparency Board in the federal government to state and local government portals that help with this use case. And then innovation and scientific discovery. The acceleration of the pace of science when you put large amounts of scientific research out there and have thousands of people accessing that data and making discoveries rather than the few that could access the data when it was on premise. So these are the different motivations that organizations and people are trying to achieve when they launch their open data programs. But you don't get there right at the beginning. Driving impact with open data is something that takes time, and it's an adoption curve, once again, that we've seen across the world as people have been spending more time on their programs. So what is the adoption curve? Well, after about 5 years or so of watching what's been going on in the open data space, we want to share some thoughts on what the adoption curve is. So first, you see an organization release a definition or policy that says this is what open data is for us, and this is what we want to achieve. And pretty much across the board, the first thing that we see organizations do is to launch an open data catalog. Now, this is basically a place where you can collect data that's already available to the public, but in one place that makes it really easy to find it and to use it. But we see folks that launch these catalogs finding that nothing necessarily happens just as a result of launching the catalog. They want people to do things with the data. So what do? They hold hackathons and challenges and other types of activities that are aimed at encouraging people to use their data. But once again, it's not necessarily having the big impact that they're looking for. So what do you do next? We're seeing organizations start to gather customer feedback and say, okay, what data do you want to see? What formats do you want to see it in? What do you need us to do to make it easier for you to do things with our open data? And as a result, the organizations that have been doing this for a few years now are increasingly looking back and looking to their legacy systems and saying, what data have we not released before and can release for the first time? And using that customer feedback to prioritize. And interestingly, it's bigger and bigger data that they're starting to release. So what happens next? You see organizations starting to organize around focus areas, health, safety, transportation, and repeat this process of getting people to use their data, getting feedback, opening new data, and this is where we're starting to see some impact. Now, those motivations I talked about before, those benefits, I want to spend just a couple of minutes telling you about some local governments that are seeing these types of benefits and driving these kinds of outcomes. So we have one customer who has found that when they release their data, the students that are in their area are using especially geospatial data to write their thesis papers and do other things with this data from an academic perspective, but also are starting to create businesses around the data that also, in addition to having an economic impact, are really providing excellent services to the citizens in their area. So a fantastic example of that is taking roof outline data that's a local data set, combining it with the federal National Weather Service data in order to create tools that help homeowners estimate how much money they could save from installing solar panels. And so we're seeing in this particular city a real emergence of companies built around the open data that the city is releasing. Another example is a city that is storing really a pretty substantial amount of data in the cloud and is using it to drive the improved delivery of services to the public, both by the classic case of releasing open geospatial data, base maps, transit maps to the public and enabling others to create applications, but also very interestingly and really impactfully using this to increase the organization's agility, to be able to develop their own applications and create better services to the public. And in emergency situations, disaster management situations, where they really just don't have the time to deal with having to find and share data. So they're creating all sorts of applications, transit maps, applications that help you find buses, but also bike sharing, figuring out how they can assess and plan to fill potholes, resurface streets, and as I said, handle disaster response and cleanup and repairs in a very agile way. So why AWS? We're really excited to be focusing on this area. I may have mentioned before, we really see it as a logical place for customers to come to drive impact with open data. And it's really because we have this comprehensive toolkit for opening data at any scale. You don't have to worry about how big or small your data is. We can support that. And the benefits of AWS for open data really build on our core value proposition. So I'm going to tell you about a few of those. So there's this idea that you can foster a culture of innovation around data. Well, what does that mean? When you go from having on-premise infrastructure, you see that the experimentation doesn't happen very often. It's expensive to fail. There's not as much innovation that goes on. But on the cloud, on AWS, you can experiment often, fail quickly at a low cost, and drive more innovation. We see our customers do amazing things when we reduce the cost of experimentation. And when it comes to open data, that's one of the things we hear our customers most want to do. We want to make, they want to make it easy for people to innovate around their data, whether it's internal to the organization or external. Doing big things with big data. Well, like I said, we're seeing increasingly that the data that's being made open is big. And you know what? AWS has a full portfolio of tools to make it easy to do big things with big data. For example, Amazon Redshift is a fully managed petabyte scale data warehouse. And for less than $1,000 per terabyte per year, you can get access to that incredible tool. So if your open data is big data, you can do big things with AWS. Another benefit is discovering the hidden value of data. You can make data available when you don't yet know what its value is, because the cost is low, that we're reducing prices all the time, and there's a lot of different pricing models you can do in our pay-as-you-go model. So how do you get started? We have a really robust ecosystem of partners and entrepreneurs that we see helping our customers all the time help drive impact with open data. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about a few, and you'll hear more about one particular solution when Philip speaks in a couple of minutes. So what we're doing here is we're convening the open data ecosystem. For example, catalog providers. I mentioned before that's a way that we see lots of folks getting started. We have catalog providers including Junar, which you see featured here, which is powering Pasadena's open data program. And then we've got CCAN, DCAN, other solutions you can find to help you get started on open data. We've got other partners that we're convening and making as easy as possible for you to find and launch. We're also working with the government and nonprofit spaces to hold up real great stories and best practices that you can replicate. And we're also working with the businesses to use open data. You can go to our marketplace to find any of these catalog solutions and try them out and launch them very quickly. And increasingly, we'll be putting more and more, helping more and more partners make their solutions available on the marketplace. So that's what I am sharing with you right now. I'm going to hand it off to Philip in just a moment, but first we wanted to do a quick poll just to understand a little bit about the experience and motivations of the folks that have joined this webinar. So we're going to flash that up on your screen, and if you could please just take a moment to answer the questions, that'd be great. Okay, thanks everybody for participating in that quick poll. I'm going to hand it off now to Philip, who's going to talk about his experiences driving open data in the city of Pasadena. It's all yours, Philip.
Hi, good morning everyone. And thank you very much to Ariel and Amazon Web Services for inviting me to share our story here in Pasadena with you. My name is Philip LeClaire, and I'm the Chief Information Officer for the City of Pasadena. And I've been with the city for the last 6 years and the CIO for almost 3 now. And previously at Pasadena, I was an IT consultant supporting predominantly public sector clients, and also formerly worked for the City of New York in the Department of Finance. So anyone who's from the East Coast, hi. So getting into our story about the road to open data, I wanted to impart a couple things. First is that everyone's road is going to be unique, and hopefully our story will inspire everyone on the call today to take the next steps. And really, it doesn't take much to get started, but some leadership and a catalyst or some type of motivation to get going. Open data is more than just kind of a buzzword, and I think Ariel captured a number of things that are going on. But open data, to me, is really a great way to bring about experimentation and innovation within your organization. And so far, in our experience with open data, it does take a lot of discussions, a lot of hand-holding, a lot of persuasion, and excitement building. But overall, it should be fun, and it should create some new opportunities. So at the end of this quick road, the story, I want to make sure I leave with you that I think that whoever's on the call, should just dive right in. It really doesn't take much to get started, and there's no 100% predictable outcome of what's going to happen, but really this potential of open data really puts you in the driver's seat to unlock the value of the data in your organization. All right, so in our early years, just to set up the frame on kind of where we started from, this is around 2009, and we had a lot of the same factors that probably a lot of the other municipalities and other government institutions were faced with, really around the financial downturn and putting pressure on delivering city services. There was also this public distrust of government and asking for more transparency. And we were really buried in public records requests. People wanted to know, information on purchase orders and cell phone bills and other phone records, and they wanted email, and they wanted employee salary information, and the list goes on. And we were dealing with fewer staff and a growing amount of work due to a lot of retirements. From a technology perspective, most of our legacy systems did not talk to each other, and all the reports that were generated out of the system were reporting on information months and months ago, after the fact, and this data really wasn't being used to gain any insight into overall operations. And there was a lot of frustration. City leaders, staff, as well as the community were frustrated that there was really no comprehensive view on a lot of the city information and city operations. And so in response to that, earlier on, before we even called it open data, we had two early what I would call open data projects. The first was the automation of the public records request system. And like a lot of us, and still it exists today, is that it's really difficult. There's a really difficult visibility into the public records process and the request, mainly because it's largely paper-based. And here in Pasadena, it was distributed across every department did it in its own way. And so we wanted to bring in some automation tools that could help deal with workflow, to assign departments and staff to public records requests, to increase accountability, to track activities, and also to collect what the correspondence would be with the requester. And so the result of this system that went in place around 2010 was we now have, we are able to report on the number of requests, the time spent, the cost to produce the actual public record. We're able to report back to constituents and elected officials on average time to respond to these requests. And we've been able to add new features such as top 10 questions, self-help, and knowledge base so that people could get information on their own. And overall, we've been seeing a steady decline in the overall number of requests. But at the end of this, though, while we're not releasing the raw data in this raw format, it still started the groundwork to starting asking these questions about what the data that's being delivered. And so we were able to finally have visibility and say, you know what, why are we sending this information out to the people who are requesting? Why aren't we posting this information online so that people can get to the information themselves without having to put a request in at all? The second thing that we did was an OpenGIS site, and this was a lot of us have GIS organizations that produce different types of maps, custom maps. They have information on parcel boundaries, street center lines, all kinds of good information. And I believe this was really low-hanging fruit, mainly because it was data that was already being created for a variety of different purposes, and it was being asked for over and over again. And also, the GIS group reported into IT, which I'm the head of the department. And so it was an easy way to make a directive that said, we're going to start posting all of this online. And we began posting all of our maps information that had public value to be accessible publicly. But we didn't stop there. We also took shapefiles and the KML files, which was the first stages in providing raw information, posting it on our website so that others could take that information and really do their own analyses. We also had a couple other things going on in the city at the time. The first is we had a real new vision for the IT department as a result of our strategic plan and our demands of our customers. And we really wanted to turn ourselves into an operation that was delivering much more value than just operating technology. We had lots of different databases within in what we were supporting, and we had a role in breaking down the barriers and information silos just from the data alone. We were also wanted to figure out how we could use data to better our own operations and really take a better stab into a performance management by utilizing our data and metrics. And then I also wanted to tap into the natural problem-solving capabilities of our IT departments. And our IT staff really like to problem solve, but also have the more propensity to be innovators and trying new things. So why don't we tap into that? I also wanted us to engage with the department with the greater Pasadena tech community. Previously, around this time, all we had in terms of working with the community at large was managing our city website, and that just wasn't enough. There was much more we could be doing with the greater tech community in Pasadena and engaging them to help in creating this new vision for the department. And then finally, we had an interest in Code for America. We actually were an applicant to Code for America in their second wave of cities, and although we weren't selected by Code for America at the time, it did spear two things. First is that it was the first time we were discussing, probably at a city executive level, about a method to kind of push innovation in our organization through disruption. And if those of you who don't know Code for America, I really strongly take a look at what their mission is. But basically, they send usually 2 or 3 person team to embed themselves within the city for about a year, and they help deal with some community challenges and try to deal with them through technology. The other thing that we found out on Code for America is we started to discuss, why is it that we need to bring in an external entity to come help us change or innovate or improve? Why aren't we supporting some of the champions that we know are within our organization, and we just needed to help them, support them, and remove some of the hurdles? So ultimately, we wanted to support a culture of innovation here in Pasadena, and so we were looking for different ways to do that. So kind of in our middle years, one thing that happened for us is that we have this organization called Innovate Pasadena that was established, which was about making Pasadena a visible place for economic development initiatives around technology, research and development, design and innovation, and as an innovation hub. Predominantly, we have a lot of rich resources right in our backyard here, and we're very lucky for that, such as Caltech, Jet Propulsion Laboratory, NASA, Art Center, a couple of other community college campuses, and other innovative companies. And we wanted to bring them all together from a city perspective so that we're all working together to bring visibility to Pasadena as an innovation hub. And for me, here in the city, I felt this was a huge opportunity calling for us, because this was our chance to look on beyond our walls of just within our city hall, and actually participate in something that's greater. And so we focused on 3 areas. First was engaging other local technology leaders, and so we've been participating, and I've been visible out there in the community and joining some of our the various meetup events and other groups around Innovate Pasadena. The second was a broadband and fiber initiative, which is really around infrastructure to make sure we had the right assets here to attract the kinds of businesses for an economic development purposes. And the third, which I'm going to talk about more in depth, is the civic-themed hackathon. We were watching how some other larger cities, major cities around the country, were experimenting with civic hackathon, releasing public data to inspire application and innovation and conversations across the community to further benefit the community at large. And so Hack for Pasadena was decided we were going to do a civic-themed hackathon around this time last year, and it took us almost 9 months to put it on. We probably could have done it sooner, but we did change around the schedule for a variety of reasons. But Hack for Pasadena was a way for us to reimagine how web applications, technology, and community participation could shape the future of the city. And with the Hack for Pasadena, we needed access, or we needed to release city data in order for the hackathon to be successful. So in trying to formulate Hack for Pasadena, we discovered a lot of varied interests. So we had some strong interest in some of our departments who thought, oh, this is great. Let's release this data and maybe we can figure out something to do with it. We also had a lot of indifference. People who are like, okay, just let me know what happens, and I'll pay attention to it at some point in the future. And then we also had resistance. So we had a variety of interest in Hack for Pasadena. But at the end of it, we were able to get 74 data sets released, which covered finance and budget, transportation, transit, traffic, GIS, census, demographics, community interest around public art, as well as 311 citizen service requests posted in support of the Hack for Pasadena event. And we attracted students and developers, community members, and other technology professionals in the area. We had over 100 participants, and they developed 15 different applications for around a little more than $6,000 in various prizes. But what's most important from an open data perspective is that, at least from Amazon and Junar, is that through Hack for Pasadena, we were able to create the city's first open data site, and we did that on the Junar platform on Amazon Web Services. And what's interesting about our creation of our open data site is that we didn't do it with an open data policy, as you may have been seeing other communities do. And we also created the site under the radar, meaning that we knew we needed a platform in order to host the data so that it could be accessible for the event. But it's not that we use the platform to aggregate the data together, and then at the end of the event, now we have actually the beginnings of our open data site stood up. So it's kind of a ingenious way, kind of indirectly but directly, create the first open data site for the city. So since March until today and going forward, a couple other things have been going on. The first is that there's been a lot of inquiries about open data that's been growing organically. And really, a lot of this is stemming from Junar and other software platforms and other external marketing efforts that are planting open data verbiage into especially government vocabulary. We have city executives, elected officials who are attending conferences where open data and new applications are all being showcased. And there's lots of publications like Governing Magazine and Public CEO and others that are showcasing how open data and the results of releasing your data more broadly can actually support a lot of efficiency and other economic development interests. So that's been kind of on our side. The second has been to revisit our open data goals now with our city executive leadership and talk about what those goals are, reflect on the successes that have happened, and then also stake out a future vision. And really, in that conversation, reactions are still all over the map. There is some strong interest, there's, again, indifference, and there is also still resistance. But at the end of this, what we're doing going forward is we still are on our pathway to continue experimentation, innovation, and building upon our prior successes, and really focusing on continuing to build that momentum internally so that we have those successes to continue to rely upon and push this open data agenda forward. Leads me to this other issue around this call to action. And what's going on is that, to me, open data is really in its early stages, and it needs more of a framework and a standard to help municipalities and the government at large to publish the most useful data in a consistent format that makes the data interoperable and aggregated, that will ultimately increase its value to spark new application development. An example here that I see is Open 311, which has developed a set of standards and a data framework so that any application developer can plug into this framework, which lowers the cost of the application itself and makes it more easily accessible for municipalities and other government entities to tap in. And so something like that with open data, I think, would be really useful in helping getting a lot of municipalities started and on board with open data. And I think Junar and Amazon Web Services can really play an important role in this too. Junar has published a lot of tools to make it easy, and they're hosting data on AWS, but also normalizing that data and making it more broadly accessible across jurisdictions, across states and counties, I think will solidify the future of open data. So in conclusion from our story is that really find your motivation to get started, whether that's innovation or breaking down silos or community engagement or further transparency. Everything is all about experimentation, and you should look for people who are going to support both internally and externally. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It even doesn't have to be both. It is finding those champions to at least get started and try something out. Junar and Amazon Web Services can definitely help support your message. For us, Junar has a lot of templates. They have presentations. They have information that can help you communicate what open data is all about and how it can affect and improve and help your operation and your organization. And then Amazon itself, in hosting this webinar today, I think is a testament to them saying, hey, we want to really help all the organizations really do something with open data. I wanted to mention a couple books, I think, that are really good to take a look at. One is the Beyond Transparency, Open Data, and the Future of Civic Innovation, which is a Code for America publication that came out around October of last year. And it really talks about a lot of stories from all over the country on and different use cases on how they've taken open data and technology to really change things. You have Citizenville by Gavin Newsom, which really talks about citizen engagement using technology. And then Innovative State by Anish Chopra, who is the first, or who was the first CIO of the U.S. government. He recently published a book just about a month or two ago, and it really talks about open data at the federal level. So to leave you with in conclusion here is that it really doesn't take much to get started. I really suggest start small. It's going to involve, but more importantly, really have fun with this, because it is going to take you somewhere fun and exciting and open up lots of possibilities. Thank you so much for listening to our story today, and I wish all of you success with open data in your organization.
Thanks so much, Philip. That was awesome. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open it up for some Q&A. And I've got a couple questions for you that I want to start off with. But everybody's welcome to submit questions, once again, using the console on the right of the screen. So please do go ahead and submit your questions. So Philip, the first one, just thinking about your experience, what's the one piece of advice for a leader who's trying to launch an open data program that you have? One piece of advice.
One piece, I have to reiterate what I said before, is that you just need to jump in, and you're going to find people who are interested and just innovators within your own organization, and you just need to connect with them and start small and utilize the data sets that they want to make available and start to champion those and find successes in them.
I have a question that comes from the fact that you said that you're lucky to be in kind of a university town, an area that has a lot of academics and students. I think that we have some folks on this webinar that come from the university community. So can you give them some advice on how best to engage in open data activities?
Definitely. If there isn't anything going on in your community, I think reaching out to your elected officials or even getting into the IT department and just asking them about how you can volunteer or help or take a look at things. A lot of this is going to be about starting dialogue before it's going to result in anything specific. But I'll tell you, we have, on occasion, we get volunteers who show up looking for something to do and they want to get involved, and they're technology professionals who just live here or live nearby, and they want to give back. So it's how do you tap into that? There's just a lot of ways. What we've done is attend different meetups, be more visible, bring technology in the forefront of some of our city strategies, and really try to entertain the volunteers to actually come and hear and talk and discuss what's possible here in the community.
Great. And I think that we have a question from one of the attendees, and it's about business case. So you think about how you're going about getting ready to launch this program into your open data effort. What kind of process did you have to do around business case development, determining the investment you need to make in this, and the potential value and ROI?
That's a really good question. And actually, this is where it's at this point, open data to me is more of a vision, and it is something that that people have to get behind because they believe that by opening the data, it will release value. And there are examples, let's say in one of the books that I mentioned, where they talk about how they have opened up certain data sets and they've been able to create efficiencies in a very specific and an exact way. But that it's really hard at this point, I think, to extrapolate it to open data as a vision and a philosophy. And so when I have been out there talking about why we're doing this, because I get asked the question, why are we doing this again? I have other work to do from our other department heads, and really I have to persuade them and talk to them about the possibilities of just opening the door a little bit, giving examples of what has happened in other civic themed hackathons or other open data initiatives, and talked about and touched upon some of the values that could come from it. So in all honesty, there isn't any specifics. There really isn't an ROI that can be referred to. There really isn't a business model yet. And those of us who are starting to push this out and we're trying to gain more insight and trying to come up with examples to pull together to make it much more of a business case, so that it really turns from early adopters where we are now to it just becomes regular business.
And I'll just weigh in real quick with an example from a customer of ours in Singapore, where if you do look at some bottom line financials, there are some examples out there of being able to cut costs through these types of programs. The Singapore One Map is an application where they've gathered GIS data from over 80 government agencies onto one portal. And it spurred on the development of over 100 applications, for instance, helping you determine where you should purchase your home. And it's also reduced costs for the agency by 60%. So I think that we're hopefully going to be seeing more examples and be able to share them across the community that cares about these things to give some more ammunition to building these types of business cases. So another question from the group for you, Philip. How important is a formal open data policy?
So it can be very important. Here are my thoughts on it, and just to reiterate what we are. Pasadena does not have an open data formal policy at this time. But in my thoughts about it, number one is that an open data policy can help in two ways. One is that it helps push or compels departments or business functions to actually open up data. So if you need it from a this carrot and stick perspective, this is kind of the stick. It says if you look at the federal government model, Obama has signed an executive order about a month ago or so, which is requiring all agencies to open up a lot of different data types, and what that does is that it puts a requirement to actually make open data something that's really visible and something that has to be accounted for and reported on from a policy perspective. So if you need some more ammo to say no, we're opening up data, or we want data to be open first without having to be considered closed, it should be open first, and there should be reasons why it should be not published. And the second thing is around standards and framework. So part of our discussions as we were talking about our goals for the next investments or where we want to take open data here in Pasadena is there's still a question about, well, what data should be put online, or what data should be open, or what data should not be open. And so open data policies can really help provide clarity to what kinds of data or the types of data that an open data initiative wants to seek out and for what purpose, and which ones should be protected or how they should be protected. For instance, crime information, which we do have available openly, is that you don't want to provide too much specifics, but you want to summarize or generalize some of the information so that it's not attributable to any particular person or individual. We want to protect identities of people of information that shouldn't be disclosed. So I think an open data policy is important, and we're going to have to come up with, at least in providing standards and frameworks for our future investment.
Great, thanks, Philip. So another question from the group, I think it gets back to what you're saying about open data supporting interoperability or wanting to help make it possible for open data to support interoperability. And when you look at the idea of smart cities, infrastructure, not just IT infrastructure, but the actual physical infrastructure, what do you see the connection between open data and this idea of smart cities?
I see a really strong connection, and smart cities is something that's also starting to kind of take hold, and we're looking at it as well. But in terms of the question the aspect of the question that really kind of struck me when you were asking it is that open data can have a public side of this, but can also have an internal. I've talked with other people who have taken the leap into open data, and a lot of organizations have done open data internally, meaning that they're breaking down the silos between departments, different operations, and they're making the data more accessible. And it may not be available publicly, but at least it allows other data sources to be aggregated for analysis purposes. And the place where that has happened traditionally in the past has been in GIS. GIS has been one of the few places that's always kind of been open internally, where all kinds of data resources have all come in to play in order to create GIS analysis, GIS maps, and so forth. And so when it comes to smart city, I think it's going to play the same thing, is that a lot of the benefits that are being espoused about smart city is really going to take around city assets and city operations across an entire organization and try to boil that up into a dashboard or a disaster or a special event response. And so to have that data accessible and have the initial frameworks about data needs to be open, whether it's publicly or internally open, having it accessible and available in a way that can be looked and synthesized and analyzed across multiple types of services in the city is going to be hugely valuable.
Great. So another question from the group. This is one of those really what makes open data work kind of questions. Can you talk about some of the challenges with keeping the data that you're publishing fresh and useful for citizens?
Yes. So keeping it fresh is one thing. So in getting the first wave of data into the open data site for a hackathon, we took anything. We took PDF files and Excel spreadsheets and extracts of databases and needed to get things up as soon as possible for that event. And now we're going back and figuring out how we can automate most of those tasks and keep the information fresh. And it does take some time. But what happens, too, from an innovation perspective, is that we're creating new scripts and new automated functions and that are helping hold this information in a consistent way. So it kind of goes back to the basics of technology or IT operations to keep the data updated and keep going. And also, I think the value in the data that's on the open data site need to have some type of regular refresh, whether it's real time, whether it's every hour, once a day, once a month. Anything beyond that may not be so useful anymore. And then the other part of the question was about how do you pick the data that's the most important, and the answer to that question is, how we're doing it is Junar and some of the other platforms out there that host actually do track, and they see who's using it and how often it's being used, and so you can get some reporting on to what's being looked at and viewed and how it's being viewed. But there's the other part of that too. When I mentioned standards and a framework and helping put a standard and framework around open data, is that right now that's a question that comes up, which is, well, what's the most useful information that could actually be utilized to build a new application for the city or the region? And no one really exactly knows that answer. But if we had more of a standard and a framework around the most common data sets that we know that the cities all have and they should have, and we help all cities upload that information in a consistent in an easy format, then we at least have our first body of 5, 10, 15, 20 data sets that can now be aggregated, and many, many application developers can utilize that data more broadly, and we could, in the result, have an application or multiple applications that could be utilized off of that same data in support of all of our operations. So easy answer in summary is that we just don't know yet what is the most important. But there are some easy ones. The ones that we know are being asked all the time: permit information is a biggie. Anything around land use and building, citizen service requests. So if you don't have a 311 system or something like that, where you're bringing together all the requests from an organization into one place that you can start to track and monitor and report on what the city is doing from an operational perspective, fixing potholes, repairing street lights, those kind of basic tasks.
Yeah, and Philip, we had talked previously about how having more and more cities release the same kinds of data could have an even bigger impact. So of the different types of data you've talked about, is there a particular kind that you think is a good target to rally people around, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the two that I just mentioned in the last answer, one was, Open 311 is kind of a framework for application development, but an area around how are requests coming into a system, so almost like a 311 type system. What's the heartbeat of the organization? Do you have graffiti problems? Do you have pothole problems? Do you have water, sewage backups in certain areas? How do you get that data and you can look into that information to really do something with? The other one is around, I think, all of our land. So I mentioned permitting and building inspection and code enforcement. All these kinds of things really show what activities are happening that are visible out there in the community, from construction to road work. You have the crime information, and crime actually has done a lot through other vendors to actually aggregate a lot of information together. So, I mean, those three things come to mind right away. But of course, we have 74 different data sets on our site, and then there are, if you go to someone like the city of Chicago, has I think like 2,000 data sets available. So depending how small or large you are, it really you start to get into many other areas. Public health could be another one, tourism, and anyway, so part of I think that what this call to action, and if there's kind of interest or some of the development of interest later on, is that to come together as different municipalities to come up with what are the top 5, 10, 15, or 20 data sets that everyone should be publishing, because these are the common most data sets that are important to anybody, and the ones that I just mentioned are probably the ones that come to mind that are important to us. Thanks.
So a question back to, you were talking about standards and some of the technology behind this. We have a question from the group on how did you decide which standards to use and choose a provider or doing it in-house? And the follow-up question, I can repeat it after, is how did you evaluate API design for open data?
So there's a couple of questions in there. One is about how do we decide on how we're going to extract the data and put it online. And I have to say I left that up to a lot of our application and database owners who worked with the various customers of the systems that we had to extract what they thought was relevant information, probably some type of key as well as description, what kind of request or what service was it, so that it could be somewhat useful information. And that's, again, that's somewhere where there is no framework for, and so it was really reliant upon the data owners themselves in helping extract what could be the most important aspects of each record. And then when it comes to the provider, I think probably looking into what the meaning of the question is maybe how picking Junar. There are a couple of other software providers out there, and just like my answer to that is every software provider has its benefits and somewhat weaknesses too. And there are a number of vendors out there, and I just recommend that everyone who's looking into this should check out the ones and evaluate the ones that could provide the best value to you from a cost, from a serviceability, from the vision of the organization. And the good thing, especially with working with Amazon Web Services, and most of these services are software as a service, that you can spin them up and turn them off and try them out and test and turn off with very, very low cost. So go experiment and try them all out and see which one is going to work best for your organization. They all have a couple of different tool sets. But the big key, though, I think in all of the services that are there, like Junar and the others that Amazon showcased eCam, is that what you're getting from all of these service providers is that what you're buying is an already built API. So as you post your data, the secret from Junar and the others is that they have already built the APIs, the web service calls, and the integration points so that anyone who wants to access or use the data can use that API to interact with the data in real time. And then also they all provide some basic and some more advanced tools to visually showcase the data and represent them, whether it's on a map or whether it's graphs and charts, or other kind of analysis tools to download and extract yourself. So that's what the value of these platforms is that the API is already created.
Great. Well, we're getting to the end, so we're going to flash another poll on screen. We appreciate everybody's feedback so that we can learn about what you would like to hear about on future webinars. And in the meantime, please do get in touch if you have anything that you want to talk about with open data or otherwise. And you can visit our website, Open Data on AWS. The link is on the screen there. And Philip, if you want to, we can direct people to you if they have any questions for you as well.
Sure.
So thank you so much for joining, Philip, and for offering just such a deep experience with what it takes to get open data done and where this space is going. We're really excited to work with folks like you on making this theoretical thing a reality that's driving impact. So thank you, everybody, for joining, and please do fill out the poll and join us for future webinars.